I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers, where we're starting a series of programs in Missouri Southern focusing on faculty members who are ending long careers here, finishing up their careers in higher education. Joining me today, Kelly Larson, Department of Communication. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And you've been here since 1999, huh?
Since 1999, coming up on 20 years and then 24 years total.
Okay. What are some of the general feelings? I'm sure a lot of people say, what's it feel like to be toward the end of that education career?
It's like being excited and scared at the same time because you're not really knowing what I'm going to do next. I was going to raise cows actually, but I sold all my cows in October, so I don't see that as being in the cards. We're getting ready to move down by my in-laws, so we'll see.
So the future's still open.
The future is still open.
Well, I know from people I mentioned Department of Communication, I always like to ask faculty members, what sparked your interest in your field? So what sparked your interest in communication?
I was a high school debater. I was a high school speech and debater in Minot, North Dakota in 1979 through 82. And I was pretty good at it. I won a few awards early in my competition and career. And I did it for a while when I was in the military, and I always really enjoyed it. So my father used to say, if you can find something you really, really like to do, then the money will work itself out, that you'll be happy that way. So, and he was right.
Great.
Yeah.
Did someone spark your interest in debate? I mean, there's a lot of times that people say...
my high school debate coach. My high school debate coach. I still keep in touch with him, as a matter of fact. He's retired now, and he's in Denver, Colorado. So he was the first guy who saw me give an ad-lib speech at an assembly or something and said, I think I could make a really good debater out of you. And so Alan Alsted would have to be that person.
Great.
Yep.
So then you were able to follow through with communication. You mentioned military service, and a lot of people have different backgrounds, but you didn't go straight into higher education. You spent some time in the military.
I didn't. I actually spent two stints in the military. I did a 3-year hitch right out of high school. Essentially walked across the graduation stage the end of May and was at Fort Benning the first week in July, which is a really nice month for weather in
Nice
Georgia.
In Georgia.
And I got out, and when I got out in 84, 85, I said I would never go back into the military ever again, because it's a tougher lifestyle. And 3 years later, I was back in the military. And so I went back in the second time, spent a couple of combat tours in the Gulf, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Determined Resolve. And yeah, it was a good learning opportunity, but when I married another officer in the military, and I did tell her when we got married, I said, when we get married, one of us is going to have to get out. So she got out first, and I followed her 2 years later.
So then you pursued the continuing higher education route.
Right. Went back to Fargo, went back to North Dakota State University, worked on a master's degree and taught while we were there, and then worked on a PhD at the University of Missouri in Columbia.
So as you were working on those advanced degrees, your goal was to let's get into the field of communication, be able to teach students like someone had worked with you.
I always wanted to be. I mean, I debated in high school, and then I debated again in college. I always wanted to try my hand at that. I tell people all the time, I was never in the elite group of college debaters, but I'm a scary judgment person of talent, and I can find people that can be really, really good. And I think that's probably the biggest part of being a debate coach at the collegiate level, is being able to evaluate talent and get those kids to come.
I know it's been a number of years, but looking back in the interviews, I know I've interviewed you in the past when you were the director of debate and forensics here at Missouri Southern, and you were working with those students.
I was. And some of those kids have now come back to the community, or they're debate coaches at places. Probably 15 plus of those are litigators, they're lawyers, and then a couple of directors of forensics. And then, of course, one of the interesting stories is the first kid I ever recruited from Rocky Comfort was Bonnie Leiby, and she went to Baylor and graduated at the top of her class, and then came back here. She was actually the school's attorney for a period of time, but she's now second in line at litigation out at Leggett and Platt. So.
So you impacted those people in their careers. The years when you had a team, I know people may not know a lot about debate and forensics, but you did a lot of traveling. It wasn't just, it was a team effort. You actually, intercollegiate activities.
It is. And one of the things that's that most people, even, you know, I had a chance to talk to Robert Korn, who retired 3 or 4 years ago, and I said, you know, the thing most people don't understand about being in the forensic world is athletic events have a season, and their season is, you know, 6 months long or 8 months long. The forensic season starts in August and doesn't end until May.
So it's all year.
It's a 9-month gig, and we had a really good level of success here. I mean, we won a national title my second year here, and then we were runners up, I think, 3 or 4 years. And at the time we were the only Division II school at a lot of those events. So the year we won it at Western Kentucky, it was funny because the coach from Creighton, the coach from Michigan, and the coach from Western Kentucky came up and asked, "Where's your school at? Where's that school at?" And I'm like, "It's in Joplin." Well, okay, you know. So I enjoyed those times. I did.
The members of the team really put a lot of time and effort. I can remember those years that the debaters were committed to their activities.
They are very committed to their activities. It's a Thursday through Monday traveling, so you're driving all day Thursday, competing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then coming back Sunday night, Monday morning typically, and then going back to the classroom on Tuesday. It's the average level of people that do that in terms of tenure is about 3 years.
As a coach.
because you get burned out pretty quick. And I somehow managed to do that for 12 and change. So it's a rough life, but it's a very rewarding life too.
Tell me about your national championship year. I think we interviewed way back then about that. But what was it like to be able to come back to Southern with a national championship trophy?
It was crazy because we got back here. It was the one tournament. It's typically the one tournament a year that my wife joins us because she can help me judging, and then I don't have to pay these exorbitant judging fees. And so it was the second year she'd been along, and the first year we just had a misstep. It was kind of my fault. We ended up 4th that year. But that next year I went with a smaller squad. I only had 4 kids that went, but we had 2 of the final 4 kids, I think, that year. I had kids on opposite sides of the semis, and it just kind of fell together. Like, Bonnie Libby was actually on that team. She did most of the research for us that year, and it really is a team effort. I had 2 really good speakers that were really good on their feet, and I had 2 really good researchers, and it just happened that they got on opposite sides. One of the kids lost in the semi. The other kid lost in the final round that year, but we ended up winning the team title, which is kind of ironic because that next year, that kid that lost in the semi as a freshman, which is really kind of unheard of, he ended up winning the whole tournament. So he was national champion the year after we were team champions, and then we finished runner-up that second year.
So it really motivated him to continue his effort.
It did. And yeah, Jeremy Hollingshead was probably the best debater I ever had, but Bonnie Libby was by far the best researcher and putting positions together that we ever had. You have to have both.
It's a team effort. They have to have those skills on that team working together. No one carries the whole load by their own.
Right. There are no lone wolves in that event.
Right. Well, working at Southern, you also had the opportunity to be the head of the Department of Communication.
I did. It was a really odd time too, because we were going through the governor's initiative on education, which was a statewide effort, and we'd been selected to revamp one of our courses, and that happened in the midst of all that. And then one of our faculty members' visa didn't work out, so she got stuck overseas and couldn't come back my first semester. So that fall of it must be 2012. That fall of 2012, I think I taught 8 classes, was the department head, and I was still the part-time debate coach because we had another year of funding for that. So I don't remember sleeping a whole lot that whole year.
All those new programs. That project you mentioned as far as the governor's course redesign, that was a major project, and Missouri Southern kind of leading the way in many places.
We ended up being one of the 3 that got adopted statewide. It was us, there was a project from Springfield, which was chemistry, and then there was an art history one from Southeast Missouri that ended up, and what happened is those programs ended up getting farmed out to all the universities. So when we go to MU or whatever and they talk about teaching oral communication, they're teaching the program and the study that was done here.
And that took a lot of effort. I know a lot of time when you redesign a course. And for our viewers, maybe explain what that involves. You say redesign a course. What does that mean for the student?
Well, typically what it meant here at Southern was we at one time had 28 individual sections of oral communication, and we had part-time and adjunct people teaching each one of those with 20 kids. And the redesign of the course meant getting rid of all of those adjuncts and putting the class together in such a way that it could be what we call hybrided, part in the auditorium, part online, and instead of having 20 kids in the course, you have 300 kids in the course. And the educational idea behind that is you get rid of drift between instructors, so you don't have some people that are requiring 6 speeches and some people not requiring any speeches at all. And it allows you to kind of centralize all of the teaching of that NCA competencies, which is kind of a good thing at that point. We found as we were going through and evaluating some of the courses that we did indeed have people that were giving or requiring 6 speeches in an oral intro class, and then there were 3 sections where they didn't do any speeches. So I think we've fixed that in a lot of different ways.
So it really helped with accountability and keeping consistency for the students.
It did, and I tell people all the time, don't be fooled. It was a cost-saving measure. 2, the university makes a lot of money off that course, which they spread around in the School of Arts and Sciences. But there is some consistency too, and that was probably a bigger concern for me as I was going through and looking at all the adjuncts.
And the results. Technology played a big role as well. I mean, prior to that, we maybe not had the implementation to be able to say we're going to have an online course, be able to do things like that.
Yeah, it was really one of the first ones that required a major investment in broadband. When we were sitting, after we did the pilot and we were instituting the first real-time class, and looking at the roster going, man, there are 314 kids in that auditorium, and we're going to have them all online taking the examination at the same time. And I voiced my concern to the director of tech. I said, I think it's going to crash your server. And it crashed the server.
We've got to be able to handle everybody wanting to get into the internet.
Yeah, so it required them to spend about $500,000 in rebuilding some of that infrastructure and broadband. But I think they've been past that point already. You know, which is kind of the start of a whole bunch of classes going to the hybrid format, which I think the students really like anyway. So,
so you think that's a trend for higher education? Students are going to want more of that type of interaction with their classes?
I think they are. I mean, over time, the first part of the semester when we ran those hybrid courses, you know, you'd get back your evaluations from the end of the course, and they'd be like, I hate the hybrid format. I only get to see the professor once. And about 2 or 3 iterations, I love the hybrid format. It's great. You know, I have to come to campus. I think that's where it's going. I mean, you're going to see a time where all the classes are hybrid. At least half the time, seat time we call it, will be in the classroom. The other half will be in the laboratory, and you probably won't even have the campuses open on most Fridays, I think.
So the evolution of higher education changing in the world. And you've seen a lot of those changes through examples such as the courses such as this. What about your being able to work with the students, whether it's in the classroom or through these interactions through the internet and so forth, the impact of students?
I think it's harder. I think that it's more time intensive. You start under the notion that, oh, teaching on the internet will be easier. But the thing is that the backside of that is it makes you more accessible to the students at all hours of the night. And so you may end up answering, instead of answering 2 face-to-face questions in class, you may have to, on Monday morning after speech upload with 300 kids, you may have 150 emails, and you have to answer those. You have to answer all those. So it is more time intensive. But I tell people all the time, especially some of the older people, that it doesn't really matter whether or not they enjoy teaching online or not. That's where it's going. So your goal as an educator is to get in front of that and at least be able to talk about, here's what we should be doing in those online classes, instead of just saying, oh, I don't want to do anything, I don't like it.
You got to adapt with the times.
You do. It's constant. It's just constant.
Now the upper level courses for the seniors and the people who are getting, there are a lot of importance of face-to-face classes.
There are.
You still have a lot of those where you're working directly with the students in the classroom.
Yeah, especially with the capstone course for our department. That's changed a lot in the last 10 years too. We used to do senior, I'm sure everybody probably remembers, I'm sure you probably remember, we used to do senior exit interviews.
Everybody would gather and have interviews with all the students.
And was just sitting around one day talking to when I was department head, talking to Ward Bryan, who's now the department head, and said, we got to do something about that senior capstone. That isn't an accurate measure of whether or not the students are learning in our discipline. And I actually got the idea from the education department. They started requiring that of their majors to have an educational website and portfolio, and I just had a thought, and I was like, that's where it's going. That's where we're going to need to be. So
for our viewers, both the seniors who are graduating from the department now have a e-portfolio, a program showing what they've done.
Right. They work on their websites from most of the students from the second year, the ones that aren't transfers. So initially they start working on that electronic portfolio and the introduction to human communication, which is the one-on-one class, and then over the semesters they do bits and pieces. So when they get to this last semester as seniors, they have a website, and they at least have some support for some of the skills that they said, whether it's doing play-by-play or editing video,
right,
or laying out the chart, or doing play-by-play over at the stadium. They at least have a sample of what they've been doing.
And that helps with what we hear a lot about in assessment for higher education. You have to be able to prove to somebody that you are indeed teaching the students.
Yeah, and every once in a while, and every once in a while it's good. I think we just randomly select 6 or 7 of those websites, and we send them out to our community advisory board, which has some PR practitioners and some radio and television and newspaper people on it, and we just have them look at the website, and we don't tell them what kind of grade they got, and just to try to see what it is they think of those products. And it's resulted in sometimes them saying, though we think that's a really good idea, you should include the same type of resume, or we didn't really like the introductory videos at the start because they didn't look professional, and I never looked past that. So I think we get some good ideas from the community, and that is really the community we serve.
Right.
So our students have to be ready to go when they leave here.
And then ready to go when they leave here. Obviously, students want to find a job. Are these types of things helping prepare them for that working world or the higher education world if they're going on?
You get I think you get feedback, especially as you run that course. You get feedback from employers or from students who will say, I didn't think I was going to even get a call back, and they told me when I was in the interview, we looked at your website and we thought it was wonderful. We want that as our social media director or whatever. So I think, it opens doors.
And so helps them prepare for the future. In time.
It does, because that's where it's going.
Great. Do you hear a lot of the people wonder, as someone who's been teaching for 24 years here at Southern 20 or so, do you hear a lot from graduates? People come back and talk to you or send you email messages or feedback?
I try to get one. I always say, it's funny because we've had this discussion. My wife is retiring this year too, and I always say I get one message a year, and I pull it off to the side and I stick it in the door. I've got 24 of those messages.
One for each year.
Yeah, and typically they're, I thought you were really mean when you were teaching this class, but as a graduate student, I really appreciated it. Or I'll get something like that, or you were really hypercritical about my public speaking, and that didn't work out until I had to give my first press conference. So I demand a lot, I think, as my expectations are really high. Maybe it's because of my background and my military background, but I expect a lot. But I have a general feeling that if you expect a lot, you get a lot. Right. So
I think you see that paying off for those students who go on to the work in the field and working together.
I think it does.
I've seen a lot of changes at Southern even in 20 years as far as facilities, the campus as well. Any thoughts about how much the campus has developed, is looking different than it did when you came here 20 years ago? Or
I think it's really odd that, we've always been, I came from MU where it seemed like we always had money in the department to do things, and I came to Southern and we didn't have a professional staff to man the cameras, and we didn't have a staff editor to edit video, and we had to use students, which I think ends up helping them out and helps us out as well. But I would say just the last 4 or 5 years, we've kind of we've always been the university at the bottom, and in the last 4 or 5 years in the state of Missouri, we've become the one that's kind of more up at the top because our enrollment goes up, and we're one of 3 institutions that's in the black in the state of Missouri, which has allowed us to garner funding for other projects. I'm sure you're probably aware of the first 15 years I was here, I don't think we built any buildings.
No, it was pretty quiet.
And then just the last 5 years, we built 3 in a dorm. Right. And I saw them last they've been last Wednesday, they're staking out another dorm space across the road over in the hole. And so I think, wow, that's kind of cool. They're going to build another dorm.
Because the enrollment's growing, and they want places for people to stay on campus and so forth.
Yeah.
And of course, not only teaching at Southern, your family commitment, your children attended Southern. And that's something that, a lot of times people want to faculty members, where do their kids go to school? They came here as well and got their education.
They did. My daughter came through here, worked on a psychology degree, was an honors kid, and went to the University of Oklahoma. She'll have her PhD in industrial psychology in December. And it's funny because we chuckle about this all the time. The group, she came in with 13 other group cohort students, and there were kids from Stanford, and there were kids from Penn, and there were kids from Ivy League schools and Wake Forest and Illinois, and there were all those kids are gone.
They didn't stay through the program.
Flunked out. And the two kids that made it were the kid from Missouri Southern State University and the kid from the University of North Dakota. That's the two students that are left. So I tell people all the time, you get a really good education here, irregardless of what it costs. You do get a good education here. My comparison is the two places I've been, the University of Missouri and North Dakota State University, which are fine institutions, but they're a lot more costly than what we spend for here. And now I've got a son who's a double major in business and HR, who's 3 weeks away from walking. He has no idea what he's going to do, but he's like, I've talked to some of my friends that went to other places, and his best friend went to the University of Arkansas and has loaned $55,000 to go to school. And he's like, I loaned $3,500 that 1 year.
So when I start working, I have a lot less to pay back.
Yeah, well, that's like $17 a month for the next 30 years or whatever. And we just kind of chuckle because it still is a really good value. The school is still a really good value.
So sharing that testimony with students and, of course, family, people who are listening, thinking that it's worth that investment to bring your children to school here.
It is.
Tying that together. Do you have any sort of message you'd like to share with the students that, I know you have these classes where you talk to them, you say you like to make sure they're, learning, any special words of wisdom you like to share with students in those classes?
I think the one thing that I see kind of dwindling amongst the student body is what I like to call academic persistence. Sometimes the answers aren't all provided for you right out. Your professor expects you to kind of figure out some things. They're not going to handhold you. And today, with technology, students will try to look or try to do something one time, and then they'll be, I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm just going to give up and not do it. And I think that's something that's kind of lost, because I think the thing that I remember when I went to my professors in 1985 and wanted to ask a question, I would exhaust every possible reason or approach before I actually went to that spot.
So you'd put out the effort before you'd say, I don't understand.
Right. And most of the time you can find those answers. It's just a matter of being persistent and finding those answers. And today, if kids don't find it in the first whack, they just give up.
Do you think technology is affecting their ability to not only look, there's too many choices out there with those computers or the internet, or is it they're not using the library, or are there certain ways of approaching it? Or?
I think they can use technology for the things that don't include academic endeavors.
Right.
So I know that it's not bad. I just think we don't value that persistence in graduates. I just don't think we don't value that kind of ethic to be able to get the answers on your own. Now, college shouldn't be a place where you look at the back of the book and there are 500 terms and your job is to rote memorize those 500 terms. Instead, college should be a place where we teach people how to critically think and how to get to the final answer, not just tell them this is the final answer. So, whether it's statewide testing at the elementary and secondary level, or it's senior assessment in some way, shape, or form in other places, we've kind of lost part of that. And so if I would say anything, I would say I wish we'd bring back more of the critical thinking.
Will that in turn help them when they're in their careers or in industry or where they're going, that the boss is going to want somebody who can find those answers?
Oh, exactly. And I think one of the things I try to flash every semester in the spring semester for the Communication 492 capstone course is these are the skills that the employers are looking for. Like Forbes always publishes an index of things that employers want in December. So you look at it, and most of the time it's critical thinking skills and communication, interpersonal between employees, and being able to do team projects. They're always in the top 10 of the skills that are lacking in graduates, and I think that's probably pretty true.
And I know you work with your students on team projects as well. That's one aspect of learning through some of your courses, that they're working together with others in the course to accomplish
I think
goals.
that's generally true of most places you're going to work. Whether or not the collaboration is sitting around a table and hashing something out, or spending 10 minutes virtually in GoToMeeting talking to people all over the world. I mean, that's just part of it. You're going to have to learn how to adapt yourself to those measures, because that's where it's going.
That's the future. What will you miss most about not being in
Students.
higher education?
The students. Right, it's the students. I always tell everybody, I never had any favorites for students because I hated them all. Right, but it's actually, I always tell people that if I could do anything different, I would be more patient with students. But yeah, it's going to be, and then getting a card from a student 5 years after and saying, I just took the head debate job at Washburn University. I want to thank you for everything that you taught me on how to do that. I mean, those things, those relationships, those are forged over a lifetime. So that's probably it.
People could still reach you through the internet, I'm sure, even with your retirement, right?
Well, I was threatening my wife today when I was texting her. I said, "It's 3 weeks until I lose my phone, because I'm not taking a phone or a Facebook site into retirement."
So retirement's kind of an opportunity for you to have a new approach, a new adventure.
It's I hate to say this, but it's going to be a beer and a fishing pole.
Something you haven't been able to do the rest of your career.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Kelly, I'd like to thank you for visiting with me today, and I know there's a lot of students who'd like to thank you for the impact on them and their careers as well, and Missouri Southern thanking you for your contributions here.
Hey, there you go. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us this week. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.